Right, good afternoon guys. Well, I have a very quick video. It was something which I discovered the other week. I was either talking to Gav or doing a stream, I can't quite remember what it was, but I had an epiphany, which is quite rare for me, so I thought I'd record it for, I don't know, sentimental reasons. It's probably one a year I get one of these, so yeah, I thought it'd be quite an interesting one. It's a conversation I've been having with a few people, or certainly something that I've noticed with the sim with regards to how we can sort of replicate some real world procedures. With respects, I suppose, specifically to things like radio beacons not working, i.e. the ILS. So if I have a look at a quick NOTAM here, hopefully that appears, hopefully that's all good. So we can see we're in nonce at the minute. We can see there's a NOTAM here. This is for the 3rd of October for about 2.5 hours or so. The ILS runway 03 is US due to maintenance, so do not use. So this is a real world problem. You know, you do go to airports occasionally and you can't use a particular approach because, as we just saw, the ILS is going to be out of service at a particular time. So that raises a few questions of what you can do. We can see the wind there is quite a good tailwind as well, so we can't land on the reciprocal runway because the winds are out of limits for that. So what else can we do? And more to the point, can we simulate this in the simulator? Well, I mean, yes we can. In the Fenix we can, at least. We can't do this in the fly-by-wire, sadly, but we can do this in the Fenix, which is quite nice. So at the minute I have the ILS tuned. We can see that it's November Tango, that's the ILS. There's the ILS for nonce 03, November Tango, wherever it says, there it is. We got magenta diamond here, magenta diamond there for the localizer and the glide slope respectively. And it's something which I've been discussing. One thing it would be lovely for the simulator to do would be to have an application or some option somewhere where you could deselect things, certainly like an ILS. So, you know, it'd be nice to deselect it so you can't use it, or, you know, even some like approach lights. Now, I think you can probably do things like you can amend scenery. There's probably things like that. I don't know if you can do that with payware scenery, and of course you need to be relatively quite conversant with how you do that anyway, which I'm not. So there's got to be an easier way, really, and fortunately there is, or certainly for the ILS anyway. So we saw there was no time that the ILS was going to be out of service, so if we were doing a flight in the simulator that sort of replicates that time of arrival, you would look at the NOTAM and you go, well, okay, the ILS is out of service. But in the simulator, we can't quite deselect it, or can we? Well, yes, we can. That is something we can do, which I've only just noticed, which was my epiphany. So in the Fenix failure management model, if we go into the configuration and the manual failures, if we go into the navigation side of things, we can actually fail the transmitters, which I only just noticed the other week when I was doing a stream. Now we can see we got an ILS, we can deselect an ILS1 localizer. This does, there we go, because we got that, we got ILS and localizer in red, and if I unpause that, we will then get an associated ECAM. And we can also do that with maybe the glide slope as well. So we can deselect these as a failure. I don't really want to do that because that's not really replicating the glide slope or the ILS being unserviceable. We don't really want to sort of replicate a failure of the aircraft, but we can do that with the transmitter. So if we just go down to localizer and glide slope and fail those, now we can see we've got no indications whatsoever and there's no identifiers. So we've effectively failed the ILS system. So I can't actually do the ILS anymore. So this is a really, really good way of just simulating a particular failure. Now occasionally you get a NOTAM to say the glide slope's failed. So the localizer may work, but we may not get any glide slope indication because that may be NOTAM to be out of service as well. In which case, if we do that, we can still do this approach. We just basically do a localizer only approach, and the caveat to that is obviously it's a higher minima compared to the ILS, and the RVRs needs to be a little bit higher as well. So we could still do a localizer only approach. We just have to fly that differently. We'd have to do that in lock only, so we'd arm the lock so that becomes blue, and then we would also do this in track FPA. So we'd wait until the localizer has been engaged, and then at the applicable descent point, which in this case is 9.2 miles from the DME of the ILS, we would then pre-select the descent angle, which again in this case is 3 degrees, and we would wind that up into the FPA, and we would go down at that descent angle. So we can do it that way as well. Now of course, from a planning point of view, if we're going to dispatch and we know that the ILS is out of service, we can fail that, and then of course we won't do the ILS as an approach, we would do something else. Now fortunately in this case we have an RMP approach, so we could actually do an RMP approach instead. So we're quite lucky that this is an alternative procedure, and again we would just use the higher minimums, so 373 feet, LNAV VNAV minimums, and again the RVR is 750 meters. So we have to make sure that the weather is good enough, or certainly the visibility is good enough to do this approach. So this is what we'd look at from the planning stage before we've even dispatched. And if we know the ILS is going to be out of service, then we just select an RNAV approach instead, and then we would start looking at doing that. And of course, usual conditions apply. We would use the approach phase, and we would just get final app. Now if I deselect that, deselect the ILS because it's not doing that. Now we've got the VDEV bar, which is what we would expect for an RMP approach. So that's pretty much all it is. It's not particularly too difficult to do, but it is one nice thing which I spotted, that we can actually initiate a failure in the Fenix, and that now can actually simulate or emulate the fact that an ILS or maybe a glide path is actually out of service, and of course we'd look at our NOTAMs to see that. So that just sort of adds maybe a little bit of extra realism, I suppose, to the simulator, where you could fail that, and that now forces you to do a different approach, which I think is quite a nice thing to do, because now you're having to think a little bit more like us, the real world guys, and you know, fly the aircraft appropriately as well. So where's the minimums for this one? RMP, so 373, that would go in. And again, you would just fly the approach pretty much as you normally would, but you don't have the reliability of the ILS. So of course, if there was fog, for example, and it was 400 meters, or maybe, well, say it's at 500, 600 meters, it might be 600 meters, there may be LVPs. I'm not too sure if this is, I don't know actually, is this an auto lander capable? Oh yeah, so we go, we've got Cat 2 and 3 minimum here as well, so we could do an auto land on this runway, but if the ILS is out of service, obviously we couldn't. So if it was foggy, you'd be forced then to have a look at the minimums and the visibility, and of course the minimum and the visibility has to be higher than what it is on the RMP approach, because now this is the only approach that we can actually do. The other caveat to this is if Nantes, for example, say this was the alternate nominated alternate airport, maybe you would go into Bordeaux and this was your alternate. If the ILS was out of service, there are additional minimums that need to be applied as well, because this is now an alternate airfield. So generally it's one above, so this is now considered a non-position approach. So because we can't do a non-position approach, or well, we would be forced to do a non-position approach, should I say, we would probably have to have circling minima, so the visibility would have to be good enough to do this. Which there's a little table in the manuals that I've written that kind of goes through that a bit more specifically. But obviously you can read that if you need to. But there we go, I thought that would be quite interesting, guys, just to sort of highlight how things like ILSs being out of service in the real world, and when you sort of see that when it's promulgated on a NOTAM, you can actually emulate this now in the Fenix aircraft specifically. You can't do this in the fly-by-wire, sadly. I did just have a quick look, but the only failures in the navigation system of the fly-by-wire in here are the radio altimeters. That's the only failure you can actually trigger in fly-by-wire. So you can't do this, sadly, in the fly-by-wire aircraft, but you can do it in the Fenix. So for anybody that does fly the Fenix, if you do come across a NOTAM that says the ILS is inoperative or the glide slope is inoperative, certainly at the time you're expecting to arrive, you can actually fail these in here, and then that kind of forces you to look at other approaches and fly the approaches differently as well. So there we go, there's the two transmitters. So anyway, I thought that was something quite interesting to do. It's only a little quick video, I suppose 10 minutes long, but something of some interest. And again, it was just something I discovered the other week, which made me realise that if I see these NOTAMs, if I'm streaming, I can now start looking at doing these in the stream as well, and it kind of forces me now to look at other things. Oh, I should have pressed that, shouldn't I? There we go. There we go. Almost a bit too late. So hopefully that was interesting, hopefully that was informative. As usual, any questions, just feel free to put things in the comments section, and I will answer. The only thing that we can't seem to fail again, which I will just sort of mention, unfortunately we can't fail things like lighting yet. That's obviously a coded issue with the scenery. So we can see there's approach lights and we can see there's PAPIs, and there are a few airports at the minute. I think Marseille's one of them. Marseille's got a lot of work in progress at the minute, and PAPIs don't work. So we can't seem to fail the lights yet, as far as I'm aware, because if you did have failures of approach lighting systems, so again, here we go, this is an RMP approach. If the approach lighting system wasn't working, the minimums would then they'll be higher, so we'd need 1400 meters if the approach lighting system wasn't working. But we can't seem to fail that, unfortunately. That's one limitation which still seems to apply, but that would be maybe quite something nice maybe in the future. But there we go, guys. So thought it'd be interesting, and I hope you have a good week. I've got to go work later on at some point today, and hopefully I'll get back on and stream soon. But in the meantime, have a good day, and I shall speak to you all soon. Cheers. Cheerio.
Above. 300. Minimum. 200. 100. 50, 40, 30, 20, retard, 5,